on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is director Peter Hutchings, and we're talking about his brand new movie, Then Came You. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
It's lovely having you here. I love this movie. I loved it. I'm really excited about talking about it. Before we get started... You're welcome. You're welcome. Before we get started, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about the premise for Then Came You?
Sure. So it's a story about Calvin and Skye, who are two teenagers who meet at a cancer support group. They're polar opposites. He's a hypochondriac, afraid of his own shadow, and she's really outgoing, burning the candle at both ends. And you know, somehow she latches onto him. She convinces him to help her carry out this really eccentric bucket list that she's concocted. And in return, she helps him come out of his shell, confront his fears, and get the girl of his dreams, Izzy, who's played by Nina Dobrev.
It's a wonderful cast. You've got Asa, is it Asa? Is that how you say it? Butterfield in the lead, and Maisie Williams. And Asa is also in Sex Education on Netflix, which is burning up Netflix right now. So it's nice to see him. Is he actually English? Is he in real life?
The two of them are.
Yeah, I know Maisie.
The two of them are.
Yeah, Maisie, because Maisie, you know, you didn't write this script. You do write scripts, though. But was it written in
I didn't. So it's funny. This was actually written by an Irish writer named Fergal Rock, and it was originally set in Dublin. And we moved it to the United States, and then, of course, we cast, two Brits in the lead role.
Of course.
And, but, we kind of kept it as he plays an American in the story, and she plays, she's English. Her family moved to the United States when she was a girl. They're
both wonderful together. Their chemistry is great. And it's a very funny, moving, heartbreaking movie. I had to bring out a lot of tissues at the end. So I always say you've got to go to the movies and be moved, and this one does, and in many ways, and it's wonderful. So how did you get attached to this movie?
I had worked with the producers before, and I was finishing up the last movie that I did, which was also a young adult movie called The Outcast. And when that movie finished, Brian Keaty, the head of development at BCDF Pictures, sent me the script to read. I'm a really slow reader, and so usually, it takes me, I have to pick up the script and put it down about 15 times. And when I can read a script all the way through in one sitting, that's a really good sign. I flew through this one, and as soon as I got to the end, I just told myself, man, if I can be a part of making this movie and helping an audience feel what I'm feeling right now, that would be something really exciting. So I jumped at the chance to come on board. And, I did tell them that, it was going to be a tough movie, tonally, a tough movie to find the right cast for. We needed to make sure. I thought that particularly that the role of Skye was going to be challenging to cast because it needed to hit a lot of very specific marks. And, I said the only actress that I could really think of who I think would be perfect for this is Maisie Williams. And, I had known Maisie previously, and I knew how different she was in real life from her character on Game of Thrones. And I knew that, she's actually a bit closer to the character of Skye, the character in this movie. So I just knew that she was going to be able to knock it out of the park. And thankfully, she felt the same way. And then, Asa was just a no-brainer. I loved his work and knew that he'd be great. And so he came on shortly after. And it was only after the two of them came on that I found out that they actually knew each other. And I loved that, and I really kind of encouraged them to spend time together. They both live in London. So, it was great for them to be able to spend time bonding and, because these two characters, the depth of this friendship, it's almost like, like a brother-sister relationship. And, that was obviously really, really important to get right. So I was happy that they were able to spend that time together.
Yeah, the chemistry between the two of them is just absolutely wonderful, and they are the heart and soul, obviously, of the movie. So that was very essential that you felt their love and concern for each other, actually, and how they help each other, and that it's a really wonderful movie. Talk a little bit about the symbolism. That was a very important element for you. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why was it important, and how did you look? Go ahead. Just tell me a little bit about that.
There were a lot of things that we were balancing in this story. The balance between the comedy and the drama. Between the laughs and the tears. And another thing that we were balancing was between the kind of grounded realism. We're in the real world. These are real flesh and blood characters, and really trying to be as specific and detailed as possible. In these, movie also operates very much at a symbolic level. The relationship between life and death. The aspirations that we have to ascend, and we're pulled down to the ground, and this is all baked into the storytelling with the symbolisms of, he's a baggage handler at the airport, who's never been on a plane before, and, she's a diver, and I was really, drawn to the imagery of water in this movie, and, the symbolic representations of, I could spend a lot of time talking.
Go ahead, please do, because I think it's important. The most wonderful thing about doing this show is that allowing the listener to learn more about the background of how a movie was made, how the director saw the vision, and the more they know, the more they will enjoy the movie. So go into it deeply, because somebody may not pay attention to that too. So I think it would be very beneficial for people to understand why the symbolism was so important and how it was manifested in the movie, how you use symbolism in the movie.
Sure. So, you take an example of the color blue, which can both be, when we think of the color blue, we think of the sky, and we think of the water. There's kind of two instant things that come to mind. And of course we have at the center of this character named Sky. And we have a character who, works in an airport. Kind of one of the opening, shots of the movie is him looking up wistfully at this plane as it's flying away into this blue sky. And the water, which we see, in the center of, the central scene of the movie, where Sky teaches him how to dive. And you have this symbolism of the ascent into the sky and the plunging into the depths. You have the two sides of the coin of this kind of movement toward life and the movement toward death, and seeing how close those are to each other. There's this wonderful plaque that they discovered in Grecian Italy at this incredible site called Paestum, not too far from Naples. And it was this plaque that covered a tomb, and they call it the Tomb of the Diver because it's an image of a man diving into this blue pool of water from a diving board that's 8 steps up, and it's this richly symbolic idea of the dive into death, the dive into the unknown. And as soon as I read that scene, I said, I want to shoot the scene, and there's a shot that, I composed to look exactly like that. There's a point in the movie where we actually see that plaque. There's some little, details like that build out this idea of, the connection between the water and death, and that idea of the diving into that, that not just the physical death, but also the death to a certain past, to the old self inside of us, which is part of what Calvin's journey is. So there's this very ancient symbolism of the water as a place of death, but also of rebirth. So there was a lot of things like that. So the color blue became really important to us, and it's counter of more earthy colors, more kind of ochres and dark yellows and oranges. And, these were kind of the conversations that we had, out of which we built the palette for the movie. And seeing these two characters who are, they are kind of polar opposites from each other, representing two sides of the coin, representing in a certain way, life and death itself, and as Sky's character moves closer toward death, she kind of pulls Calvin into life. So it's like there are a lot of really interesting dynamics and reversals there that informed the way that we, built out the production design and the costuming and the way that we shot certain scenes. There's a lot of, I used a lot of drone shots kind of periodically throughout the movie to keep giving us this perspective, this high perspective on the world, not just because it looks cool, but because it also kind of reminds us of this constant dynamic that we have in this story between the earth and heaven in a certain way, and not just in the idea of life and death and the physical death, but also in the sense of a character like Calvin who's kind of grounded. He can't move, he's stagnant, and in order for him to move on with his life, he's going to need to learn how to let go and allow this old person inside of him die so that he can really live.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, really beautiful. And it's I don't know, did you mention that Calvin's a hypochondriac and that's why nothing's wrong with him, and he just happens to be going to the cancer, support group because he keeps thinking something's wrong with him. So that's what's, because you mentioned they're in the cancer support group, but he is very healthy and nothing is absolutely wrong with him, but he keeps thinking, and he even has a journal that he keeps daily of all his symptoms, and he takes his temperature, and what else does he do? He does all kinds of things on a daily basis.
His heart rate, his temperature, his symptoms. He measures the size of this mole that he has. It's it's this, he's very, very vivid, and and we discover that there are some things that have happened in his life,
right,
that contributed to this place where he is right now. So there's a lot of things inside of him, some real traumas that he experienced that he's had to let go of. Mm-hmm. So there's some real sensitive stuff there for both of them. But we try to treat it with a light touch.
Yeah, and
we have to laugh at ourselves.
Yes, we do. We do. I mean, gosh, you can't if you don't laugh at yourself. It's just it's a tragedy. I think and it helps lightens the load a little bit. If you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and my guest today is director Peter Hutchings, and we're talking about his brand new movie, Then Came You. Peter, what the lighter touch, but interesting that I liked what you're saying. I didn't put it all together, so I'm really glad that you brought up the color blue and her name and the sky and also that you're right about water being also about rebirth, death and rebirth. I hadn't thought about the death part, but I always have seen water as symbolic for rebirth. So that's interesting. That's why I like talking to you to find out more about the symbolism of it. What other things as somebody who's watching this movie should they be looking for that will help their experience be that more enriched by knowing a few interesting tidbits from you?
I mean, there's always a lot of fun behind the scenes stuff. That at least me, growing up as a filmmaker, I always loved watching all of the director commentaries. And
me too.
Behind the scenes, I'm always interested in one of my actual earliest moments were that I think kind of contributed to me wanting to be a film director is when I watched we had this VHS of Michael Jackson's Thriller that scared the heck out of me, and the only way I could watch it is that directly after there was a making of. I had to watch the making of in order to kind of bring myself back to the reality of what I had just seen. So that was kind of like a very early experience that made me, that I think may have set off some of this drive to be a filmmaker. I think that this story is very fun, and it's very in moments it's very light and funny in moments, and very difficult and emotional in moments, and I think that that's the kind of first layer that it's going to hit people. And for me that's kind of couched in some of these deeper symbolic and thematic aspects. There's a really wonderful quote from Leonardo da Vinci that I always came back to as kind of a touchstone for the movie. He says, "While I thought I was learning to live, I've been learning to die."
I love that quote.
And it's great, and it's something that was echoed throughout the Renaissance, with Francesco Petrarch, and Cicero, 1,000 years earlier had said to philosophize is to learn to die. There's something that is, we put death away from us. We kind of hold it at an arm's distance, and it's actually the rejection of death and kind of the repression of some of those feelings that has led to Calvin being in the difficulty that he's in. And so, that kind of thematic idea of that life and death are much closer than we think. And like I was saying before, not just our physical death, but also, more of an existential death. That for us to live and really be present, it's important for us to constantly allow certain outdated thoughts and behaviors and conceptions and prejudices that we have, allow those parts of us to die and just be constantly reborn and fresh to the moment. So that that was part of what I was trying to put into the movie.
That's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and the movie is too. I definitely recommend it's a movie for everybody. I mean, it's not just it's for everybody to be reminded exactly that all the things you're saying, that sometimes as people get older, they tend to stop living. They get into their routines and just forget about what brought them joy and what made them happy. So I think this movie is a reminder of those things. Definitely, Sky is just full of energy and life. I loved all of her wigs. Whose decision was it to come up with all those fun wigs? And they were so perfect for her character.
Oh, I know. That was actually one of the first things I did when I met Maisie. We went wig shopping together in London. We didn't actually buy anything, but just, kind of that first process of, that was something, obviously, that was really important to the character. And one of the things we talked about early on was, does she have one wig throughout the whole story or multiple? And we really loved the idea of her trying on these different hats, because part of, Sky's not this manic pixie dream girl character that we see in so many movies. She's a real, three-dimensional flesh and bone character. And, part of what I love about the story is that, it's not just the story of Calvin's growth. It's also the story of her growth and transformation. And at the beginning of the story, there's a lot of bravado. There's a lot of, posturing going on there. And, part of those multiple wigs is that you see that this is someone who she's searching for an identity. Even though she feels she comes across as so confident, and she really does have some wisdom to offer, but she also has some wisdom to discover. And she does, I think, over the course of this story. So I think that that's part of what makes this story extra rewarding. You have these two really fulfilled arcs.
Definitely, and they do learn from each other. It's not just Calvin learning how to live. It's also Sky learning, I think her character definitely changes throughout the movie, but it's their relationship that enriches each of them. So it's not one-sided, which is what you want in all relationships that we have, that you want them to be equally enriching, so it does come across that.
Absolutely. And that was part of, that was really part of what I found so exciting about this story, is that you don't see a lot of movies about friendship. It's not a romance. It's a deep friendship, and you see how important it is. Part of what the story is telling is how important friendships are and relationships are for us to grow. That none of us can do this alone. None of us can live alone. None of us can die alone. So that was something that I think is really special about this story.
It is. I agree with you 100%. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about Izzy, the Nina Dobrev character, and how she plays in this story?
So Izzy's played by Nina Dobrev, who is just absolutely wonderful, a wonderful actress, and just so charming. And, one of the first ways that we encounter this character is through a drawing, a sketch that Calvin has made of her. And, he's drawn to her, he's attracted to her, but it's kind of a bit of a question of what is it that he's attracted to in her, Seeing someone from a distance, when you see someone from a distance and kind of flatten them, they become two-dimensional like a sketch. And, she's obviously very beautiful, and that can draw you in. But as he gets to know her, finding the real human there beneath, the real character beneath, that's what he really falls in love with. And so it's kind of an interesting, it's an interesting storyline in its own,
right.
In terms of how it fits in with this, with this broader thematic of the story, all the things that we kind of sometimes simplify by
right.
keeping at a distance.
It is.
And how it can be really difficult to actually, get to know someone. And that's something that obviously, is becoming, I think, more and more difficult as we're spending more time on our computers and phones, actually being with people in 3 dimensions.
Exactly.
And getting to know them and
Peter,
all of their faults and
I hate to say this, our time is up, but it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you much success with Then Came You.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
You too, Peter. Thank you. Go to the Jan Price Show on Facebook to learn more about upcoming shows, and while you're there, like my page. And also to listen to the Price Movie Minute movie reviews and to listen to archive shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
The Yozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Yozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Yozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.